Tobias is already in the house, so I'll just introduce him, and it's my honor to kind of introduce him to the group. So we all know Tobias. Tobias is going to be presenting and talking about thoughtful citizenship. So he's one of the speakers who has always explored the human relationships as writer, mentor, teacher, speaker, and he's committed to the liberation of corporate workplace. So in that same thought, he'll be presenting thoughtful citizenship. It's a term that is intended to call out the limiting idea that thinking is restricted to the domain of leadership. Whenever we think of thoughtful, we think of thoughtful leaders, thought leadership, but from his perspective, it's going to be a different twist to it. So this will be an interactive and dialogue-based session, and we'll touch upon some of the qualities of a thoughtful citizen that needs to lead from the grassroots of an organization, like faith, community, resistance, discomfort, responsibility, justice, last but not the least, stillness. Tobias, handing it over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I just put a note on LinkedIn saying I'm on my way to India. We'll be there in 5 minutes. This world is small now, isn't it? So here I am in my living room, well, in my bedroom actually, in Sheffield in the UK, which is a place where many of you may not even have heard of. And there you all are in all over the place by the look of that word cloud that came up. So it's lovely to be here. And they don't give us much time for these talks, do they? It's 30 minutes, so it's a bit of a race through and not much time for breakouts, but possibly, hopefully, a few questions on the way. So I'll leave the chat window open and try and catch those as they come in. So feel free to drop messages in there, and I'll try and save a bit of time for the end. So it's a bit of a whirlwind. Just to put some context on it, this is a reduction, a half-an-hour reduction of a 2-day workshop, essentially. So you can imagine how much I'm cramming into the time. And the 2-day workshop, they always feel like there's not enough time there either. So, but I just wanted to give an introduction to the concept, essentially. So I'm going to share my screen for this, which is not something I normally do. So I'm hoping it all goes according to plan. Yeah, let's have a look. Okay, that's good enough.
Perfect.
I'm not going to put it into presentation mode because it does weird things on my machine when I do that. So, thoughtful citizenship. Let's make sure I can see some people in the window there. That's nice. Yeah. The idea is, as the introduction said, it comes from the idea that we have this term thought leader that we use a lot in our industry, and it kind of becomes the idea that there is only certain people who think among us, and yet at the same time we are thought to be working in the knowledge industry, so we are all thinkers. So this is not like blue collar, white collar working, where the people with the white collars back in the industrial age were the ones that did the thinking, and the people with the blue collars are the ones that did the working. No, it's not like that anymore. We're all thinkers, and we have to acknowledge that we're all thinkers. And as thinkers, we also might need to step up into leadership roles as well. So when we think about leadership, there's these two kinds of leaderships. There's people leadership and there's idea leadership. So, you know, the idea leadership, we call it thought leadership, but then we have this idea of people leading other people in organizations. So the higher up in an organization you are, the more people you lead. The problem with the model is that we're not choosing these leaders for the best part. They are just being imposed upon us. So we join a company and we're told this is your manager or this is your director. We might be working at a company for some time, and because we joined because we liked the leadership team, we liked the CEO. And then the CEO leaves, because CEO shelf life is quite short, actually. I think 4 years max in the States anyway. Possibly the same everywhere else. So the CEO leaves and another one comes in. Now you've been imposed, a new leader has been imposed upon you. No choice in the matter at all, no voice in that. You just, your only choice is really is to do what the leader wants you to do or to leave. So what we're looking at here with this idea of thought citizenship or thoughtful citizenship is that everyone has the capacity to step up into the role of leader as and when needed. So in order to do that, we have to kind of start to think about a more egalitarian type of organization. There's been a lot of challenges towards the traditional hierarchy / patriarchy of organizations. And it's very difficult to change it, as we know. People say, well, you've got to have some structure. You've got to have, someone's got to report to someone else, because we're so immersed into that way of thinking. We think there can't be any other way. There are lots of other ways, but we close our eyes to them. But it's time in this day and age, when we're talking about organizational change, and we're talking about agility, we have to challenge everything. It's not enough just to say, let's teach the software developers how to do XP. That's not agility. That's just good practice, So we need to spread this out widely across an organization and start seriously challenging the status quo and the way things are. So pull that slide up. A culture of equals is what we're looking for, an egalitarian organization. Doesn't mean that everyone is the same. It just means that everyone is treated with equal respect, equal kindness. Everyone is listened to, every voice matters. So thoughtful citizens are those people in an organization who may have no positional power at all, but they lead when necessary. They lead when they're called on, and they lead through action, and they lead through shared experience. They model good practice, perhaps. They come to other people's aid, they support people, they listen to their teammates, they offer ideas. And so when you've got a truly self-organizing, self-managing team, there is no leader in that team. Scrum Master is not a leader of that team. The product owner is not a leader of that team. They're there to help you the product owner is there to create vision and to give you common purpose. The Scrum Master is there to create an environment that is going to support the work that we do. But the team members are the ones that do the work, and they're also the ones that need to consider how to do the work, and they're also the ones that need to step up into those leadership roles as necessary. It's very difficult to do, and it challenges us sometimes, but this is what we're looking for, people to step into these roles. So what I want to look at in this presentation is these 7 areas of focus that I think are important for any citizen of an organization. I use the term citizen, it's just an employee would be the way we normally talk about it. We're an employee of an organization, but there's something a bit more serious about calling yourself a citizen of the organization. You're taking it seriously. My wife is currently in the process of getting citizenship in the UK, and it's quite a process. And no matter which country you choose to live in, you need to apply for citizenship at some point if you want to stay there. And there's something really important about it for the person going through the process. They don't make it easy. It's not like doing a CSM, is it? In case any of you have done it. Long process, lots of boxes to check and evidence to give, and money, of course, is behind it all too. But when you get it, when you finally achieve that, there's a great sense of like, I belong, I am part of this place now. Wouldn't it be nice if we felt that way about the way we work? Research into engagement in the workplace is quite dismal. We're looking at 2/3, 66% or something like that on average. People are disengaged in the work that they do. They can't be bothered. Some of them are just passively disengaged. They just do what they're told and hope to get out when they retire. Others are actively disengaged, which means they're pushing back and arguing and fighting. So we've got massive disengagement, right? So are we disengaged in the country we live in? Perhaps some are to some extent. People that don't bother to go out and vote, for instance, might be disengaged. But the majority of us care about the place that we are. And the place that we are from 9 to 5 every day is the office, is the environment of work, the place where we create things. For us in the knowledge work industry, we create things. We're not just doing boring work, we're doing exciting work, doing work that matters, work that changes things. So we need to get engaged in that. And so we're all citizens of the workplace. I want to look at these, keep an eye on the time here, these 7 things very briefly, just to give you a kind of a taste of it. These are the areas I like to explore in a lot more depth in a workshop situation. But there's some odd words in there, aren't there? Faith, that's an interesting one. Community, resistance, discomfort, responsibility, justice, and stillness. Okay, now these terms can mean many things, of course, and that's part of the idea of exploring them, is not to just kind of go, oh, I don't like faith. I have no religion, therefore that one doesn't count for me. Now, what does faith mean? I can say that I have faith in in my children that they're going to succeed in life, or I have faith in my friends. So there's lots of different kinds of faith. And if you move to the next picture, this is what I mean by it in a corporate setting. We have faith, for me, is essentially the opposite of fear. You know, we often show up with a sense of fear in the workplace. And the higher we go in the organization, the more promotions we get, actually, the greater the fear. Because you're higher up, you can fall further, right? So the fall hurts more. If you get fired as a director, it hurts a lot more than if you get, well, maybe, I don't know. But there's a tendency to think that, you know, there's a lot more pain involved in that. Of course, nobody wants to get fired from their workplace. But we do show up with a lot of fear, and the fear is a block. It's a massive block to learning. And what I've found is people who are higher up in the organization are unable to learn new things for the simple reason that they got as far as they got on the basis that they know stuff. So when you know stuff, you can't really learn more, because that indicates that you don't know stuff. So people are caught in this kind of trap, this dilemma of seniority. The more senior you are, the more you're supposed to know, the less, therefore, you can open yourself up to not knowing. And if you don't have not knowing, you can't learn. So we get kind of stuck there. So people are showing up in fear. Whenever there is cutbacks in an organization, it's usually some layer of middle management that gets hit the hardest. So a lot of fear in that. So faith is to confront that, is to overcome it, is to come through it and to trust. I've put embrace the mystery there, that we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. None of us know. All kinds of things. You know, we like to have some sense of knowing where we are, but it's not always possible. And the more we embrace that, the more freedom that gives us to innovate and create and experiment and explore. And the less we have it and the more fear that we have, the narrower we become, the less innovative our products become, the quicker the company's going to go out of business and we lose our job. So it actually works against us. It does the opposite. You know, fear and holding on too tightly is the way that you're gonna have a short life with that approach. But it takes a leap. It takes a leap of faith, is what we say, right? And that's why faith is something to focus on there. Yeah, you know, also it touches on the idea of faith, touches on this sense of being in service to something greater than ourselves. You know, Dan Pink talks about that in his motivational video. It's one of the 3 operating principles he talks about, being in service to something greater than ourselves. And for many people, that's something greater than ourselves is some sort of spirituality, is some possibly religion for some people, and all to the good. You know, I embrace that. If it helps people to become motivated and to be less fearful, then that's a great thing to bring into the office. Right, second one, community. Much more of a familiar word. That's not just being with a bunch of people. There's a lot more to it than that, obviously. But I've called out this idea of being other-centered, which is, you know, to get away from being self-centered. So very often, you know, we talk about myself, and it's all about me and how much money am I going to get? What's in it for me? Those kinds of questions come up. You know, when I've introduced agility sometimes to organizations, that's the question. I go, well, what's in it for me? Rather than how is this going to improve the organization, or how is this going to help my team, or how, well, often we don't have a concept of teams, or how is this going to make our products greater? It's like, what's in it for me? A lot of mistrust in that question. So when we're trying to create community, we have to be very much concerned with other people. Neighborhoods that work well are neighborhoods where the neighbors care about one another. Not the neighborhoods where they're spying on each other, the neighborhoods where they are welcoming the newcomer, knocking on their door and maybe baking them a cake or something like that, or whatever the culture happens to be. But a way of welcoming people in and being there for them. You know, I was trying to fix my car the other day, and a man opposite immediately came out with a bunch of tools and asked me if I needed some help. That's neighborliness, that's other-centeredness. He wasn't thinking about having his cup of tea and his cigarette. He said, that man looks like he needs help, let me go. So that's what we're seeking in an organizational context. You're serving. Of course, the Scrum Master role, as we all know, is the role of a servant leader. So that's the emphasis very much there for me on service rather than leading. All right, so the Scrum Master is there to serve and cultivate change. Then we got resistance. This is a vital one. it's about standing strong in your integrity. It's not just kind of like resisting everything. It's recognizing where decisions that are being made are within your integrity and where you're asked to do things that are outside your integrity. And sometimes we are, we're asked to, cheat on something, or we're asked to do things that, to commit to a bunch of work that we know in our hearts that we can't possibly do in the time that we're asked to do it. And we say yes, because that's stepping outside our integrity. That's losing resistance. So resistance here is it's not just about pushing back. It's about pushing back with questions, or with offers. I'd love to do that. I'm not able to take that on. Realistically, I know I can't do it. Let's have a conversation about what we can do in the time. That's the form of resistance we need, a kind of pliant resistance, a resistance that invites people in, not pushes them away. But it requires us to stand strong in our integrity. And as soon as we let that go, we're in trouble, because you can't really have a meaningful conversation when you're lying to yourself. So what we got? We got 1, 2, 3. Here's the fourth one. Discomfort. That's an interesting one. Discomfort is being able to welcome the sense of being uncomfortable. Now, we talk about psychological safety in the workplace a lot, and it's important to make the workplace psychologically safe. And people over the last few years have kind of modeled that up with the idea of comfort. They want to be comfortable at work, and that's not what psychological safety is. Psychological safety is brave space, not comfortable space. It's being able to step up and feel the discomfort that we sometimes feel when we have to challenge things. You can't resist or confront if you don't, if you're too comfortable. You can't. There's not much action you can take from lying on a big soft sofa. So that's comfort. But we want people to be uncomfortable. We want them to be on that edge, always pushing that edge of theirs. And part of discomfort that's difficult for us is when we move from doing what we're told by a manager to having to think for ourselves and make decisions and have ideas. And that's hard in itself. But then when we've got ideas and other people don't buy into them, that's also uncomfortable. Makes us cross. It makes us, like, why can't you get it? Why can't my idea is great? You've got to do what I think. But part of discomfort, and it's the core of collaboration, is letting go of our own ideas, allowing ourselves to be wrong, admitting that and moving through it, which requires us to trust other people. And trusting other people is an uncomfortable thing sometimes. It's like, why should I trust them? And sometimes we don't know why, but we have to do it anyway. So we begin with this idea of trust, and all of this kind of change that we're asking people to go through, and we're asking ourselves to go through, creates this form of discomfort. I separate that, by the way, from another term that's quite similar, which is disquiet. And disquiet is more about when we know that we're going to do something that's out of our integrity. We have a real sense of uneasiness within ourselves. We know that what we're doing isn't right, and we're trying to like excuse it and justify it. Now, that's disquiet rather than discomfort. The discomfort is the ability to be uncomfortable, to recognize we're uncomfortable and to do it anyway. And then we've got responsibility. So I would say, sadly, you can take Jeff Sutherland up with this later because you'll see him, won't you? Sadly, the word accountability has been emphasized strongly in the latest version of the Scrum Guide, that this person is accountable for this and that person is accountable for that. When we're accountable, it means that we are somehow less than this other thing or this other group or this other person that we're accountable to. There's I heard, and I think it's true, that there's no word for accountability in Finnish. They don't have a word for it. They have the word for responsibility, which is different. And the director of education there, Pasi Salberg, said, accountability is what's left when you take responsibility away. So when people are not acting responsible, we have to hold them accountable. But we don't have to hold them accountable if they are being responsible. So we want to encourage responsibility in an organization. We want people to be engaged in the work that they do. We want them to own their decisions. We want them to own the product direction. We want them to own the work that they do. Now, if we start to go out of our integrity and start to compromise on the things that we're doing, we're not going to be very engaged in the work. So we don't really care. And when you don't care, you're not really taking responsibility, right? Then you have to be held accountable. Then management has to step in and start measuring you and rewarding you and, you know, telling you that you have to be accountable to this person for that. I was put on a performance improvement plan once just because I didn't comply. I didn't comply to the performance improvement plan either, and I soon found myself out of a job. So that was the beginning of my agile career. It's got to start somewhere, right? I didn't compromise though, you know. And I'm not saying there are times, you know, there are times when it's important to compromise. It's not that you never should do that, but it's when you're compromising and you're, again, it comes to that word. If you're moving out of your integrity, you're going to end up in this place of disquiet. It's not comfortable. And there's no place to move from there. You put yourself in a trap. And then number 6 is justice. You want to have a sense of justice. Now, certainly in the country that I live in, and I think perhaps even more so in America, we think only of one kind of justice: retributive justice, revenge, essentially. So the prison system, the court system, the prison system, the fines that we pay, they're all based on retributive justice, getting revenge. And there's 2 other kinds of justice as well. There's distributive justice, making sure everyone gets a fair share. So it comes back to the egalitarian organization, distributive justice. And there's also restorative justice. Restorative justice is giving people another chance. It's grace, if you like. It's giving people grace. So the kind of justice we're seeking here is not retributive justice, it's distributive and restorative, right? It's making sure that people are well served, people are getting their needs met. That's a nice way of expressing it. You know, we all have innate psychological needs, emotional needs. And when those needs are threatened, it causes us problems. We become anxious, we become depressed, we become fearful, and we act out. We act out on that. So distributive justice is keeping an eye on things. It's making sure that our teammates are being taken care of. And when we see disturbance, that we ask questions, we talk to them and ask what's going on. That's not the manager's job, right? That's my job. It's your job. It's our job as colleagues, as friends of these people, to stay tuned in to their emotional state and to recognize when things are hurting, when things are not going well. It might be nothing to do with us, but it's still worth asking. And that's justice. And then we've got stillness, finally. Okay, and this is something that we don't have nearly enough of in our organizations. And there's always, organizations seem to be driven by a sense of urgency and busyness. So we're measured on how busy we are. Even many people who practice Scrum, they talk about measuring the amount of output. We're doing 10 times faster than we were before. But what does that mean? What does that mean if you're not delivering what people want? There's plenty of cases where organizations have practiced Scrum and gone really fast, but actually not delivered anything useful. Lovely example of that would be MySpace. I don't know if anyone remembers MySpace. Back in the, I don't know, early 2000s, it was one of the first early social networking platforms. They did Scrum, and they delivered lots, and their velocity got faster and faster, and then they disappeared. So you can kind of draw your own conclusions from that. Not enough stillness, not enough time just to sort of pause and take a look around, listen to what's going on, listen to the customers, listen to the organization, listen to the energy of the market, and really do nothing for a moment. This is what we have built into Scrum, isn't it? We have it built in as a retrospective, and that's a really nice time to do that. But perhaps we need a bit more time than that as well, rather than always being driven and pushed and moving fast. It's time to do a bit of stillness. And then finally, we've got these what I call the 3 guiding principles that kind of come behind all of those 7 things. We're doing with compassion. We're doing it with courage, and we're confronting. We're doing it with confrontation. Now, confrontation is a word that a lot of people don't like because it can be violent. That's what a confrontation in war, or confrontation in battle, is a violent confrontation, which is why it's tempered with compassion. So we're looking at compassionate confrontation, where we're caring about the person that we're confronting. We're not treating them as the other. We're not treating them as less than us. We're recognizing their humanity, and we're also saying, I don't think this is the right thing to do. That we're confronting the system, the decisions. We're not confronting on a personal level the individual. And that takes courage. It all takes courage. So those three words, compassion, they all begin with C, which is nice. Compassion, courage, and confrontation are what I like to think of as kind of underlying what I do. If you prefer the word empathy to compassion, that's fine too. So it's a word that we're a bit more familiar with in the organizations. Compassion to me is broader. It reaches out to even those people that we can't feel with, but they're still worth considering. So that's the presentation, and I think we do have a few minutes.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Tobias. I think a lot of the things that you've talked about, it's a good perspective to see that it's not just a manager who has to bring this all about it. It's all our collective responsibility to think in these terms. So it's really given me a lot to think. So thanks a lot for that. Anybody who has the questions, please raise your hands and we can go from there.
Yeah, raise hands or...
Ashish, I see Ashish has a question. Please go ahead, Ashish.
Hi, Ashish.
Hi, Tobias. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yep. You're to me.
First off, thank you very much for the simplified approach of these 7 aspects of the human behavior, which are essential for any kind of success. The question that came up in my mind was, what would be your thoughts around the perception-based responses that we normally get in our day-to-day lives, especially in the corporate world? Major part of our conversations are perception-based. So what are your thoughts around that, Tobias, considering these 7 elements, if we keep them in context?
I'm not sure what you mean by perception-based, Ashish. Can you clarify that for me? So
there's a dearth of the urge in people to look for the reality or the data facts, right? It's hearsay, it's the personality of the person or the attributes of the person, reaction and responses of a person, which form the basis of that perception. It creates a picture in the mind of the leaders or individual members of the team as well. So when we keep these 7 essential elements of the human behavior in context, how do you relate, or how do you suggest we handle that perception and ensure that the conversations are basically reality based, data fact based?
Yeah, I mean, I use the term making assumptions quite often about that, and so we are always asked to not make assumptions, and that's part of our perception, right? But I think making assumptions is a really important thing for us as humans. In order to navigate our way through life, we have to make assumptions, we have to make judgments, discernments. But what we must do is check out our assumptions, and that's what we forget to do sometimes. So I might make an assumption about you based on matching to patterns of things that have happened in my past. You know, like if I look at your hairstyle and it brings up a memory for me of someone I didn't like who had the same hairstyle as you, I'm going to intuitively dislike you for no reason, right? So I have to check that out with myself. And then I have to think, okay, let me talk to Ashish. He's not that person, he's someone else, right? And so I can break that pattern and have the conversation. But if I get caught up in my pattern matching of the past, I'm going to kind of move forward with these assumptions without checking them out. And I think that's what you mean by perception. My perception is what I see.
Yes.
And what I match to is perhaps even more important, what I match it to. So we can only ask individuals to be aware of that. And if you feel like you're making a judgment, step back for a minute, and instead of making the judgment, turn it into a question. So I don't like your idea is a judgment, that idea sucks. Instead of saying, look, I don't understand that idea, can you tell me more about it? Would be a different approach, wouldn't it? You're not just saying, yeah, let's do what Ashish says. I might not like it, but I want to inquire. So we're turning, see, that's the kind of poor confrontation, isn't it? People say, well, if we should confront, I'm going to confront you by saying your idea is rubbish. That's not confrontation, that's just rudeness. Got to separate those. Yeah.
So the universal principle of concept of words actually plays a role here. Thank you, Tobias.
Yeah, thanks, Ashish.
So we are almost at time, but we'll take one more question.
Shilpi's up there with her hand up.
Pallav, do you want to go forward? Unmute.
Sure, I think building on to what Ashish just mentioned, right? A lot of it, I don't know, but especially in Indian context, because I've worked with different folks, I've seen that, a lot of Indian leadership, they develop some perception of yours based on a lot of hearsay and what they hear from your leaders. And, instead of looking into the actual contribution that you're making to the teams that you're working with, and to the organization at large, they just go by what your leaders are saying. So Tobias, any thoughts on that?
Are you asking about specifically about leaders in India as opposed to somewhere else, and the difference? I'm not quite getting it, Palaf, sorry.
So again, if I were to summarize it, how do you change perception? If someone has built a perception of you based on the hearsay, how do you change that?
Oh, okay, so I get that. So this builds on the previous question, as you said, you can't change people's perception, all right? So all of the questions that we often get as change agents and consultants and coaches is, how do I make my team more how do I get my team to be more motivated, or how do I make my team self-organize, and how do I change people's perception? We can't do any of those things, all right? So we have to create space and ask questions around it. That's really all. For things like how do we get people more motivated, my response is always stop doing all the things that demotivate them, and they will automatically become motivated. You don't have to force it. And things like how do you change someone's perception is you begin by asking questions. Whenever you hear a perspective put forward, you might ask about it, right? Can you tell me more about that? That's always a great question. Can you tell me more about that? Very often they can't, all right, because they're just repeating back what they've heard before. And so when you ask that question, they have to pause for a moment and go, well, can I? And they realize they can't, and so they realize that the perception is a bit of a myth sometimes as well. So it comes back to the same thing, Palaf. I think it's just like we're engaging people through curiosity and asking sometimes confrontational questions to them. I think we're out of time.
Thank you, Tobias.
You read my mind, Tobias.
Yeah, looking at the clock. Yeah, I know that you're on a tight schedule here, aren't you? It's been lovely, though. Thank you for listening to me. And, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm sure you'll find me. I won't put that's my full name. And I think it's on the website, actually. I'm linked to that. So find me on LinkedIn if you want to chat a bit more. Be a pleasure. All right.
Thanks a lot, Tobias.
Thank you.
It was wonderful hearing you.
I'll stick around for a bit.
Absolutely. Harshika, handing it over to you.